Audrey Hepburn was 11 years old when the Nazis occupied her town in Holland. She watched her soldiers march through streets she had grown up playing in. She watched her uncle get taken and executed. She watched her half-brother get loaded onto a train and sent to a German labor camp. She spent the next 5 years hiding, starving, and surviving things she spent the rest of her life refusing to talk about in any detail. The woman the world fell in love with, the grace, the elegance, the warmth that made her unlike anyone else in Hollywood, was built on top of something she carried quietly until the day she died. What she saw in Holland was something she never fully told anyone. What it did to her body and what it cost her later in life is the part of her story that most people still don't know. Audrey Kathleen Ruston was born in Brussels in 1929 to a Dutch baroness and a British-Irish banker. Her early childhood was the kind of childhood that looks perfect in photographs. A beautiful mother, a comfortable home, a life arranged around music and dance, and the quiet confidence of people who have never had to worry about money. She had started ballet lessons before she was 5 years old, and the people who taught her said she had a natural quality that was difficult to describe. Not just talent, but a kind of presence that made everyone in the room watch her without meaning to. Her parents divorced when she was 6, and her father left the family so completely and so suddenly that Audrey would carry that abandonment like a wound for the rest of her life. She told interviewers about it decades later with a care that suggested she had never fully stopped feeling it. Her mother, Ella, a Dutch baroness from a family with deep roots in the Netherlands, took Audrey and her 2 older half-brothers to live in Arnhem, a quiet Dutch city that seemed, in 1939, like a safe place to sit out whatever was happening in the rest of Europe. It was not safe. In May 1940, Germany invaded the Netherlands. Audrey was 10 years old. Within days, the world she had grown up in was unrecognizable, and within months, it would become something far darker than she had any framework to understand. The German occupation of Holland lasted 5 years, and for Audrey, those 5 years were defined by fear, hunger, and a silence she learned to keep as a survival skill. Her family had connections to the Dutch resistance. Her uncle, Otto van Limburg-Stierum, was one of the people the Germans identified and shot as a reprisal for resistance activity. Audrey was present when his death was announced. She was 11 years old. She did not speak about that moment publicly in any detail for the rest of her life, but the people close to her said the memory of it never left her. Her half-brother, Ian, was taken by the Germans and sent to Berlin as forced labor. Another half-brother, Alexander, went into hiding to avoid the same fate. Audrey's mother hid her identity. Her British father made Audrey's background dangerous, and Ella instructed her daughter to use a Dutch name in public and to say nothing that might draw attention to who her father was or what her family connections were. Audrey danced during the occupation. She performed in small, secret recitals held in people's homes with the curtains drawn, raising money for the resistance. She danced in silence. No music, because music would draw attention. Just the sound of her feet on the floor in a darkened room while soldiers walked the street outside. And then came the winter of 1944, what the Dutch called the Hunger Winter. The Hunger Winter. The German authorities cut off food supplies to the Western Netherlands as punishment for a Dutch railway strike that had been called in support of the Allied advance. The result was a famine that killed between 18,000 and 22,000 people. Audrey was 15 years old and living through it. She ate tulip bulbs, she ate grass, she ate whatever could be found, which was rarely enough. By the time Allied forces liberated Holland in May 1945, Audrey Hepburn was severely malnourished, suffering from acute anemia, respiratory problems, and the kind of physical damage that takes years to appear fully in a body that is still growing. She was 16 years old, 5 foot 7 inches tall, and weighed under 90 pounds. The war ended, and Audrey survived it, and eventually the world found her. Ballet, then modeling, then a stage role that caught the attention of the right people, then a screen test, then Roman holiday in 1953, and an Academy Award at 24 years old. The trajectory was so rapid and so complete that it looked, from the outside, like a fairy tale. But the hunger winter had done something to her body the success and beauty and the Academy Awards could not undo. The malnutrition she suffered during those 5 years had affected her in ways that doctors would continue to identify for decades. Her bones were permanently affected. Her metabolism never fully recovered. And there was something else, something she spoke about with enormous pain in the rare interviews where she allowed herself to go near the subject. Audrey Hepburn miscarried multiple times. She lost pregnancies in 1954, in 1959, and again later in her life. The doctors who treated her connected the difficulty directly to the damage done by the hunger winter. A body that had been starved at such a critical stage of development carried consequences that medicine in the 1950s could identify but could not repair. Her son, Sean, was born in 1960. After a pregnancy she spent largely in bed, terrified of losing another child. Her son, Luca, was born in 1970 from her second marriage. She held those 2 children with the particular tenderness of a woman who understood exactly what she had risked to have them and what she had already lost trying. She never talked about the miscarriages publicly in any detail. She never talked about the occupation in any detail. She carried it the way people carry things that are too large to be put into ordinary conversations, quietly, completely, alone. The thing that people who knew Audrey Hepburn said most consistently about her was that she was genuinely kind. Not performatively kind, not strategically kind. The kind of kind that comes from having seen real suffering and deciding consciously to be the opposite of it in every interaction you can manage. She was UNICEF's Goodwill Ambassador from 1988 until her death, and she took the role with a seriousness that went far beyond celebrity charity work. She traveled to Ethiopia, Sudan, Bangladesh, Vietnam, Somalia. She sat with dying children in field hospitals and held their hands and stayed until she needed to leave. The people who accompanied her on those trips said she never performed her grief for cameras. She felt it, and she showed it, and she kept working. Her son Sean later said that when his mother went to Somalia in 1992, she came back from the trip already ill. The cancer that would kill her 3 months later had been diagnosed, and she knew it. And what she said to him was that she was glad she had gone, that she needed to go, that a childhood spent hungry in Holland had given her something she felt obligated to spend. She died on January 20th, 1993. She was 63 years old. Appendix cancer, diagnosed too late to treat effectively. She died at her home in Switzerland with her sons and the man she loved beside her. Here is what I want you to know about Audrey Hepburn. The grace was real. The warmth was real. The kindness that everyone who met her described was real. But it was not effortless. It was not simply the way she was born. It was something she built deliberately on top of 5 years of occupation and starvation and watching people she loved get taken. And she built it so completely and maintained it so carefully that the world never had to look at what was underneath it. She was 11 years old when the Nazis came. She was 16 when they left, and she weighed under 90 pounds. She was 63 when she died, having spent the last years of her life sitting with hungry children in countries the rest of the world had decided not to look at. She knew what hunger felt like from the inside, and she never forgot it. That is who Audrey Hepburn actually was. Not just the little black dress, not just the cigarette holder, not just the most elegant face the 20th century produced. A woman who survived something devastating and spent the rest of her life making sure other people didn't have to survive it alone. If this changed how you see her, subscribe, because every week we tell you the real story behind the people you thought you already knew.